It was difficult to calm the energy the first time, and then here we do it again the second time. Wow, okay.
Board met on April 18th. The most exciting news is that we approved the charter for the new building task force. And that's the group that will lead us to the decision over the next year or so about what to do for a new space. The task force will be forming in the next month. We did place the charter online under the building section, under news, if you're interested. So if you want to be considered to be on the task force, please contact Reverend Thomas. We will be choosing the task force within, like I said, the next month, so they can start working. The only other thing I'll mention is that we discussed plans for the June 9th annual congregational meeting. So that's the date you want on your calendar for our annual meeting, where we will vote on approving the proposed budget, electing the 2 new board members that Deb was just mentioning. We're also going to be choosing the Share the Plate recipients for next year. There will be a balloting process for that. The CCCT has put together a slate of nominees for us to choose from. And we are also planning an installation service for Reverend Thomas for the September service. That's our water service where we all get back together. It'll be essentially a year since he's been here, and so you'll be hearing more about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Our fellowship is located on the ancestral homeland of the Pasquosa. For thousands of years, the Pasquosa have been stewards of this land, fishing, hunting, gathering roots and berries, and practicing cultural traditions. The Pasquosa still live here. We acknowledge that their land has been taken over because of the U.S. government, the broken treaty obligations, and carelessly allowed uninvited white colonizers to settle here. We stand alongside our indigenous neighbors as they continue their traditions and seek to have all their rights recognized. We acknowledge our shared responsibility to sustain right relations with each other and the land. And I'm just going to take a moment and say, on my trip a couple weeks ago, we stopped at the most gorgeous sculpture that's called Dignity of Land and Water, I believe. I have pictures afterwards I'll share. 50-foot stainless steel sculpture of an indigenous woman with a blanket kind of around her. And when you look at her, she's up on a bluff, and behind her is the Missouri River. The squares of the quilt, if you will, the pieces of the quilt are stained glass. It is incredible, and just a real honoring sculpture. The plaque was really beautiful. So planting that seed for all of our art.
Please be seated. You into the spirit of worship, the fact of worship with these words. My fine colleague, knew him as an elder colleague, someone I liked very much, Richard Gilbert. We bid you welcome, you who come with a weary spirit seeking rest, who come with troubles that are too much with you, who come hurt and afraid. We bid you welcome, you who come with hope in your heart, who come with anticipation in your step, who come proud and joyous. We bid you welcome, who are seekers of a new faith, a new hope, alive in the world, who come to probe and explore, who come to learn. We bid you welcome, who enter this hall as a homecoming. You who have found room for your spirit, a family to worship with, a community with which you identify. Whoever you are, whatever you are, wherever you are on your journey, we bid you welcome into worship.
The chalice and flame symbolize our congregation gathered in principles and faith. If you at home have your chalice with you, please join me now in lighting it. Here in the sanctuary, we will speak the words on the screen in unison. With this flame, we come into the circle of love and justice. With this flame, we come into the community of mercy, holiness, and health. With this flame, we welcome the spirit of peace and joy. Now, you want to go around that way? Let's form an arch. And instead of our regular song, can we sing happy birthday to Claudia today? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Claudia. Happy birthday to you. So we have two wisdom readings this morning. The first is Paul Tillich, Field Notes on the Compassionate Life. Forgiveness means reconciliation in spite of estrangement. It means reunion in spite of hostility. It means acceptance of those who are unacceptable. And it means reception of those who are rejected. Forgiveness is unconditional, or it is not forgiveness at all. And from Anne Lamott, her newest book, Somehow, Thoughts on Love. Community is a body of people crying for one another, working together for a common cause, enjoying and overlooking, or grimly tolerating, each other's foibles. It's a rough and beautiful quilt sewn of patches that don't seem to go together at all and then do. Community means we are in this together. Most of us are perhaps a tiny bit self-absorbed and good at keeping people out who don't look, vote, or act like friends, and that's very nice. But a good community includes all those other people and those of us at the edges. Welcomes are offered. Hey, come on into the circle. Yeah, you. You with your nose in the air, or a neck tattoo, a walker, or a rolls.
I should tell you that I've been going to Buddhist meditation and Stone Blossom Sangha at least twice a week. But I've been doing shared silence with people since 1997. Before that, I had studied Buddhism as a bunch of ideas, but there was a transformation in my Unitarian Universalist identity and in my understanding of Buddhism when I actually began to practice that opening together, that silent. And there's so much in our culture that's about noise and generating energy and enthusiasm, and it's absolutely essential to just be present and aware together. I'm trying to use this microphone. I don't know if that microphone's working, but hopefully my voice will carry better. Recently I saw a cartoon. In the cartoon, a robot on wheels chasing two human beings and shooting electric bolts at them. The bolts are sending up sparks. The two people are... All I asked it was, can you reduce my carbon? There's this underlying religious ideology there that human beings are terribly sinful, unredeemably sinful, and the only way to make them right is to get rid of them. To punish, to reject. But our way is to find the power, to find the stillness, to find the goodness, and to hold it up. Earlier this week, I was listening to the character Jocelyn on the soap opera General Hospital. It's through my wife that Jocelyn comes, visits us on a regular basis. And she was talking to an uncle. She had just come from facing a friend of hers who was pregnant, a friend of hers was the same age, and the two of them, but the father of the friend is a person who has ambivalent characteristics. He has for a long time in the show been depicted as the mobster with a heart of gold. He has for a long time on the show been depicted as the criminal who's actually a great benefactor of everyone and a good guy in all sorts of ways. And yet, this young woman, Jocelyn, has decided that she's angry at him for a number of reasons, but decided that he should not be accepted, he should not be affirmed. And when she saw the daughter of this man, she yelled at the daughter. She said, "You should not love him." Basically was telling her that she was wrong for affirming her own father because he was a bad person. And in doing this, she was insulting and degrading and rejecting her friend, showing no compassion for her friend. And so she was feeling really afterwards, reflecting on it, feeling bad about herself. And she's talking to this man who's basically an uncle to her, talking to the uncle, and she says, I feel like I'm a bad person, that there's something wrong with me, that I would hurt my own friend in that way. The uncle encouraged her to think about what she could do in Unitarian Universalist fashion, not to repent, not to feel miserable, but to try to reform and restore connections. I must admit that I seldom feel like a bad person. I really don't ever feel like a bad person, like I'm not worthy. Often I feel the worst criticism I have of myself is I'm stupid. That I didn't see something, that I didn't understand something, that I misjudged, that I hurt someone. And I hate it when I let someone down or misjudged what I do, hurt someone's feelings. If people are angry at me, I can feel really bad about what I did, but I never feel fundamentally at my core that I'm somehow rotten. That kind of theology just doesn't rise in me. That kind of spirituality does not rise. I understand it in others. I understand that there are some who seem to have their mind structured in a way that they feel immediately guilty, as if it's their fault when anything goes wrong. But I'm a Unitarian Universalist. The old joke is that if Universalists are those who know that God is too good to eternally condemn anyone, then the Unitarians are the people who know that they are too good to ever be condemned. You put those together, and our religious tradition is one that focuses only on the goodness of humanity that leads to healing, wholeness, justice, growth. Condemning sin might be useful in some ways, but it's not the ultimate. A favorite line of early Universalists 2,000 years ago was from the Christian leader Peter, who said, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of the darkness into the wonderful light." It may be easy to put ourselves or others into the box, the dark black box of bad people, the unlit box. But first of all, we should avoid putting ourselves in that box. Look instead for the goodness, to affirm the goodness that is there, to seek the goodness when it's hard to find it, to build upon that goodness. When I was young, I knew some people who thought of them. I had a good friend who actually said he needed a place to, he kind of got kicked out of his own house, and so he needed a place to sleep for a few days, and so he came to my little apartment and slept on the couch. and he stayed there for several months. He had quit school. He was a brilliant guy. He was a smart guy. He was in school, and he decided that he didn't need school. These teachers knew less than he did about the subjects because he loved reading. And so he just dropped out of high school, and that's why his parents weren't letting him stay at home. And then he got this brilliant idea. He heard how much workers were paid in the Oklahoma, where I was living in Colorado, Oklahoma oil fields. So he decided to go with he and another friend decided to go to Oklahoma, get a job, make lots and lots of money, and be free from everything, right? They got over the border and were driving a little recklessly and were pulled over by the police, who found marijuana in the car, which Oklahoma did not in any way affirm at that time. And his whole life was basically off track because he couldn't go to college then. He couldn't do anything. It was hard to get a job anymore. He really felt bad about himself. And there were others who judged him as foolish, as stupid, as having made a bad mistake. But his parents continued to tell him that he could do better than he had. And his friends, including me, affirmed that he could do better. And slowly he got his GED, and he got a job, and he got another job, and then he fell in love and created a family. He restored his life. He kept trying, just like the little boy in the story, kept trying. I've long loved that bumper sticker that reads, "Humankind, be both." I have a little sign on my desk now. Humankind. Be human, be kind. To give people grace. It's an ancient theological part of our roots, is to be graceful. Graceful is usually defined as not just moving smoothly, but grace is the granting of an undeserved benefit or favor or blessing. Grace cannot be earned. It is something that is freely given and is part of a relationship or of being. Those who are rooted in Christianity think of grace as central to God's character. We affirm human character, and beyond human character, goodness, caring, compassion. Find that. Notice it, look for it, seek it in yourself and others, and affirm it over and over again. Our ability to learn, our ability to grow, our ability to do better. But sometimes that's very hard to see, to find it. You have to seek it. This book, Failure, over and over, that boy is really frustrated with himself, right? He's frustrated. The daily grind of life. It's dust in our minds, ruin, gravel seems to clutter our thoughts. And so there are often in religions cleansing rituals to clarify. Often people want to go and do something that regrounds them in the Spirit, find the Spirit. So there's these rituals. In Islam, before you read the Quran, you are to wash your hands. And if there's no water, you wash your hands in sand. But you must go through that ritual of cleansing to make yourself right and ready to focus on what the words are going to reveal to you. Most religions have water rituals. Some use sand or smoke, smudging sticks to clarify, to cleanse. Shinto, there's the shaking of those zigzag strips on a stick, which is part of scattering and washing and purifying the people. I had a friend who once went to Japan. He'd just had a really tough time. He'd been engaged in religious studies, though at the same time he went to Japan and he heard about misogi, which is this, and the specific form of misogi, which is to walk under a waterfall. So he went to the grand shrine, Shibaki Grand's shrine, and he did the chants and he spoke the words and he put on the white cloth and he walked with some people into the away from the buildings to where this waterfall was pouring down, so more than 25 feet pouring down. And he walked in and he felt the power of that water going over him, and he could feel it in his soul, that he was being cleansed, that he was being brought back to rightness. And the whole idea in the Shinto religion is to restore your sense of clarity and wholeness so that you can restore all your relationships with the being, the power, the way of the kami, of the people around you. We have other rituals. When we were talking about this worship service, Deb reminded me of a moment in the movie, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" There's a moment where they're talking about eating roasted gopher and who's going to get what. They're ne'er-do-wells who escaped jail and are trying to figure out how to get a lot of money and find this treasure and this sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, these people just out of nowhere come walking through the forest, and they're singing, "As I go down to the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way." And all of a sudden, the little character Detmar just runs down into the water. He cuts into the line. He doesn't get on the line with everyone. He just goes in there and he gets baptized, and he comes out and he says, "Well, that's it, boys. I've been redeemed. The preacher's done washed away all my sins and transgressions. It's the straight and narrow from here on out. Heaven everlasting is my reward." And the other character, O'Donnell, says, What are you talking about? So, Odysseus, Ulysses says, "What are you talking about? We got bigger fish to fry." And Delmar says, "The preacher says all my sins is washed away, including that Piggly Wiggly I knocked over in Yazoo." And Ulysses says, "I thought you said you was innocent to those charges." Delmar says, Well, I was lying. And the preacher says that sin's been washed away too. Neither God nor man has anything on me now. Come on, boys. Come on in. The water is fine. Love that image of cleansing and clarity and hope. But it goes away over time. We make our errors. Others make errors. Others insult us or don't like us or don't include us. We feel the clutter and the noise of the world. We see the pain of others. It's a great Buddhist story about a Buddhist monk who has some students. And he's out on the roads, he's traveling the roads, and he gets attacked by a thief. Modern story, the thief has a gun. The thief hits him with a gun and shoves it in his chest and demands he give all his clothing to him, and the monk doesn't have anything else. Gives him everything. He's just kind of wearing a loincloth, and he comes back, and as he comes into the monastery, the students there are saying, "You are crying. Why are you crying? Who has hurt you?" And he said, "I'm not crying for me." He said, "I'm crying for that man, because I realize that if I had been him, if I had been raised as he was raised, with the brain that he has been given, with the life that he has been given, I would have been the one with the gun." That ability to understand, the ability to forgive, the ability to accept is part of seeking and finding that goodness, that power in our lives, sweeping away impurities and misfortunes over and over again, but more importantly, working to make things better. And then I heard this powerful story of a man he was speaking, and I saw the video of him speaking. He was speaking at a synagogue in New York City, but he grew up in the West Bank. He's Palestinian, grew up in the West Bank. When he was 14, well, all his life, the only Israelis he'd ever seen were soldiers who had come in. And there was one time where the entire family was shoved into one room of their little dwelling while the soldiers took over the rest of the house as a post. It was during the uprising. The soldiers had come into the West Bank to force all these people and quell the unrest. He had seen over and over the violence of these Israeli soldiers. He had seen the evil of human beings. He'd seen the failure of human beings. And then they shot his brother. They killed his brother, 16-year-old brother, when he was 14. Now he's growing up in this world, growing up. And one day, it's because of his brother, because he saw what people did for his brother when his brother was dying. He decided to become a nurse or a doctor, decided to work as an emergency room person. And, several people here who are involved in healthcare, and we know how vital it is, how powerful it is to make a difference in people's lives who are suffering, right? So he's doing this work, and he comes home for kind of a break. He's got a little vacation, a couple of days, and he goes back. He had actually had to go through checkpoints, and he was talking about all the Israelis he sees are soldiers at checkpoints, treating him like he's a danger, threatening him. It was terrible. His own father, because of his brother being killed, his own father could no longer leave the West Bank. He had a job, but he couldn't go across the checkpoints because he was seen as a threat, a father who might want to commit revenge. There was a great, Jim sang a song last night about revenge. I'm going to come back. Those people that we hate, people that we're angry with, people we're frustrated with, who treated us poorly. I'm going to come back and haunt you, was the song. We understand this desire for revenge. And so this boy comes home, or he's now a young man, comes home from his work, working in hospitals, treating people who have been hurt by soldiers. He comes in, and his mother is sitting in the room with an Israeli woman, 2 Israeli women, and they're talking. And he just walks through and says hello to them and just tries to avoid them altogether. And then he goes, "What are you doing later?" He asks his mother, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "We're part of family circles. And all of us, each of us, have lost someone in this violence. Each of us is grieving, and we listen to one another's grief. And then we decide what we're going to do about that." And she goes, "Would you come sometime?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, sure, right," he says, in this kind of skeptical way. And then about 3 weeks later, his mother says, "Oh, tomorrow you're going to go." And he says, "Mom, I'm not going." And she goes, "Yes, you told me you would. I'm going to hold you to your word." So he goes, and there are these soldiers, and the soldiers are kind of talking about what they've done. It's all young men, and all talking about the violence. And one of them says, "I served in the West Bank." And so all of a sudden, this man, Muhammad Abdul Jafar, he says, he just got angry, furious. He didn't want to even be in the room with this guy anymore. Didn't want to be in the room with any of them. And he walked out of the room, and the facilitator said, "You're here, you have no way to leave. We'll call you a cab if you really want to." And he goes, "Yeah, call me a cab." He goes, "Well, but you have to come back and join in the group." So he comes back, and he's sitting there, and he's listening. And he hears one young man talk about the violence that he saw other Israeli soldiers doing to the Palestinians and how it broke his heart and why he left the military. And for the first time in his life, Muhammad heard the humanness of an Israeli. He saw him as a person, an Israeli man who had served in the military, and he saw him as a human being. He heard the grief of others. It started to open him up to the grief of the others, the pain that human beings inflict on one another by rejecting, by treating people merely as agents of violence instead of as human beings trying to live together on this earth. And his mother and he continued to be a part of these family circles, 600 families, all of whom have lost people to the violence in Israel and Palestine, who are working together to create a different kind of community. And he says, even today, so this was back in February, so after the uprising, during the violence, he had been able to come out of, he's no longer in the West Bank, he had fled the West Bank, and then he got into Egypt and come over to America. He's going back, and he's already back. He's returned to build community, to make connections, even in a time of war, to seek restoration, to be cleansed at the moment that everyone is still being made dirty. Everyone is being hurt. We're all in this together. And if we can keep finding ways to reach out, to make connections, even in our own lives, across little borders where there is no violence, and to find the people, and I know there are always human beings who have violent rage, and bring that violence into their homes, into their families. If we can find those people, or at least just be representatives of something outside of those circles of fear and anger, we can lead to holiness. We can help people keep trying to come back into community, not only in this circle, but everywhere in the world. That's my hope.
You dork.
Knowing that this service has been centered around God ideas, invoke the great compassion, the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha nature that is present in each of us. Despite the failings of those who came before us, may we continue to seek to wake up, to be aware, to love one another, to forgive one another, to forgive ourselves, and to begin again in love. Let us go from this place in peace and joy.
And now, as we extinguish our chalice, please join us in saying the words printed in the order of service on the screen or in the chat. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And now if you'd like to try to form a circle, as we grow, that will become more and more difficult.